Worth. We have a very special keynote speaker for you to help give you context on where the state of the arts in Fort Worth is right now, what the community's doing, what the city's doing, what public art is doing, and just where we are. He is an opera singer. He is a Steer Fort Worth key holder, and he is the executive director for Arts Fort Worth. Let's hear it for Wesley Gentle. Also, a true leader in the arts community. He's a great person.
Thanks, Wesley. Oh, my goodness. Thank you all. And, wow. Ryan, if you don't mind actually bringing up the lights a little bit, I wanted to start a little unconventionally because we just had such a great introduction to kind of where we are. I'd also like to introduce us to who's here and to see who we're sharing space with and how we're coming here today. So I wanted to ask y'all a few questions just to kind of get a feel for the room. It'll also help me understand where I should spend more time in this presentation. But first of all, just right off the bat, who in the last 6 months has seen a production or been to something related to amphibian stage productions? Yes, awesome, yeah. What about just any live theater production in Fort Worth area? Okay, yeah, this is good. This is very good. Yeah, 7 months, you know, you can fudge, yeah. What about, I wrote a list here so I wouldn't just be making it up on the spot. A classical music performance in the area. Yes, awesome. And sometimes these things are one and the same, right? A museum, a gallery in the area here. Okay, that is A+. Yeah, C+ on the live theater and music, but A+ on the gallery and museum. Yeah. What about poetry, slam, storytelling, comedy, open mic, you got dragged to? Yeah, maybe you performed at the open mic. Maybe you should be up here. Fashion show. This is a good week for fashion shows. Yes? Yeah. Okay. Has anyone taken a workshop or a class in the arts recently? Nice. Who's been to a city council meeting recently? This is the crowd, right? Yeah. Don't look so excited. What about a county commissioner's court meeting? Very cool. Yeah, it's been interesting stuff going on there in that space. What about any sort of public, political adjacent meeting recently? Yeah, dance. Who's been to a dance performance, recital? Yes. There are many other art forms I could go into. Here's what I did. I trapped myself by starting to list things. But this is a room that has experienced the arts in Fort Worth in many different ways. So I'm impressed. I'm really grateful to be here with y'all. And I feel like I may not have much to tell you don't already know. But this is pretty cool. One other thing I want to do before I start progressing through these slides, and Ryan will dim the lights and I'll officially be on the amphibian stage again. Which, fun fact, this is actually the place where my wife and I went on our first date. Yeah. It's really cool. Yeah. So it worked out. How about you turn to a neighbor or even get up and move around and find someone you don't know, introduce yourself, and tell them, and they will tell you as well, so listen to them when they tell you, what you came here for, what made you want to come here today, and what do you hope to walk away with by the end of the day, or 3 o'clock or so. I'll give you about a minute and a half to get up and find someone. Get up and find someone. You're comfortable, you're with your buddies. Yeah, okay, thank y'all for indulging me on that. That was fun for me, and it killed about 10 minutes of my presentation. Helpful, thank you. Ryan, if you don't mind, appreciate it. So let's see. Arts Fort Worth, right? That's what we're here. That's who I'm here representing. I'll put this over here so I don't kick it. One thing I want to do before we get too deep into the presentation, my dad would always tell me the best presentations start really strong, end really strong, and no one remembers what happens in the middle. So before we get to the middle, I want to start by introducing some people who aren't in the room with us. But I think they're an important part of the story we're going to tell today. So I'd like to introduce you to Lillian Young. So Lillian Young is an artist from Fort Worth, Texas, currently living in Brooklyn, working in Brooklyn, living up in that area at the Brooklyn Museum, their family program up there. Lillian had a really cool exhibition at the Fort Worth Community Arts Center over the summer. In June, specifically, I want to say June 6th or so. I was there for a specific event. You can see the next slide here. And this event was pretty powerful. You can imagine. I mean, if you know the figures who are up here in this, in front of their portraits, you can imagine the gravitas and the meaning that was carried forward in their presentation. But what Lillian had done is, as part of her exhibition, she had created portraits of her elders, and she invited them to have a panel to talk about what it was like for them, frankly, growing up in a time of de facto Jim Crow and challenging race relations as we went through the 60s. So in addition to having their recorded testimonies playing in the space, we actually got to hear their words as guided and moderated by Lillian. And that was surrounded by works of art that were part of an exhibition called The Problem of the Archives. Specifically, Problem of the Archives Runaways, because she's got a couple in this concept here. And those pieces were portraits that she created using words from wanted posters for people who had escaped slavery, people who had found their freedom by escaping slavery were wanted, and the words used in those posters were what comprised their image. The price of those works to emancipate them from the gallery was basically the reward, the amount that someone would have received for re-enslaving one of these people, plus inflation over how many, some 100 years. So it was a clever thing on her part, but a powerful thing on her part. And those two exhibitions, kind of side by side, the words that were shared here today, were of course extremely meaningful and important. But I had to run across town to get to another event at the that was happening concurrently. And Ryan, if you don't mind going to the next slide. And that event was being hosted with the leadership of Daryl Radcliffe as part of the Fort Worth Public Art Program. Daryl is putting together a series of engagements, actually, because his practice in art is what he calls a social practice, where he works with people to help them tell their stories, where he works with people to figure out what the story of a community is. And he had empowered, of his own volition, this isn't, at the time, wasn't currently part of the public art program, he created a team of mentees to help him source this information, empower people to tell their stories, and create the work of art that's going to be part of the public art collection representing the Lake Como area. If you don't mind progressing, the event that we were at was called the Lake Como Black Arts Expo. This was the second year it took place. It was really cool, and throughout the event there were multiple different engagements. There was a place to go record your own testimony in a room with someone helping you, giving you prompts. There was a place to create art, sort of a paint and sip activity. There was a place to actually sit down across the table from someone, intergenerational, and have a conversation about extremely random but sometimes kind of challenging topics. And what do I want to say with all this? In the same day, through two programs that our organization was fortunate to have some sort of hand in, I got to see an example of the past being shared through art, being shared through story, and I got to see people telling the present and even telling their future aspirations shared through art and shared through story. Ryan, if you don't mind. So that got me thinking a little bit about something that we call cultural equity. It's a term that's been brandished about a little bit, and it's actually something that an organization that Arts Fort Worth is connected to at the national level called Americans for the Arts, if you don't mind. And Americans for the Arts is a place where I often go, where our team often goes to find definitions, resources. We've partnered with them on an important economic study that we've done for the city of Fort Worth, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But they've also had their own challenges, they've had their own struggles, and they've gone through their own reckoning and restructuring. If you don't mind the next slide. Oh, sorry, back one slide. Yeah, this is part of the website. If you were to go to Americans for the Arts webpage, this pops up and takes you to a really comprehensive explanation of the work they're doing. But yeah, if you don't mind going back to the slide where I told you to go back from a second ago with all the text. There we go. The way that Americans for the Arts defines cultural equity, which is, as a disclaimer, hasn't been officially adopted by Arts Fort Worth. This isn't some endorsement that this is the perfect definition, but it's a good definition. I think it's one we can use today for our conversation. Their definition is that cultural equity embodies the values, policies, and practices that ensure that all people, including but not limited to those who have been historically underrepresented based on race, ethnicity, age, disability or ability, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, socioeconomic status, geography, citizenship status, religion, to make sure that they're represented in the development of arts policy, the support of artists. You know what, actually, y'all should read this with me, because we're going to come back to these words, okay? The words in orange up here. Development of arts policy, nice. The support of artists, yep, the nurturing of accessible thriving venues for expression like Amphibian, and the fair distribution of programmatic, financial, and informational resources. Yeah, give yourselves a round of applause. That was great. So why is it important to have cultural equity? Well, I guess before we can answer that question, we have to unpack a little bit why is it important to have culture and why is art important. We're going to be doing that throughout the entire day, so I won't do it all in one conversation right now, but something you want to keep thinking about as we go through the day. But some of the reasons why arts are just tangibly important beyond maybe an intrinsic value are their economic impact. We've got a panel about that later today. These are numbers from a 2015, published in 2017 study that we did with Americans for the Arts. We are weeks away from getting y'all fresh numbers for the current year. But at the time, almost a decade ago, we were looking at a $450.6 million direct expenditure into our community from nonprofit arts groups in Fort Worth. We were looking at about 15,000 jobs created by these organizations, full-time equivalent jobs in a single year in Fort Worth. And this is back when we were a couple 100,000 people smaller, right? Beyond the economic impacts, again, we'll unpack that more later, there are benefits around public health. Some quick facts: attending just one cultural event a month, and I think y'all fall into this category, so congratulations, reduces the risk of developing depression by 48%, is what multiple studies have found. Creative therapies enable recovering from traumatic experiences through meaning-making, positive reframing, and verbal processing. Again, Amphibian is in that space very well. And I'll be up with my friends in Americans for the Arts, making sure we can get some of that defense bill money to support this sort of thing. And it also reduces symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder by 30%, which is very significant. And then beyond public health, which we'll actually be talking a little bit later as well in the panel, educational outcomes. In that same panel, we'll be talking about the fact that students who participate in one or more arts program in school were up to 112% more likely to earn exceptional scores in standardized tests, 20% more likely to attend college, and the number's not up there, but the attrition rate decreases by some 40%, I think. So those are all really, really important things that the arts contribute to these positive outcomes in our community. But I think everyone in here, by virtue of what we saw with the way we spend our time and where we've been in this community, I think you'll agree with me that there's something even more important than the public health aspect, the economic aspect, the educational aspect, and that is culture is who we are. This is the United Nations saying this, by the way. I didn't make these words up. Culture is who we are and what shapes our identity. Placing culture at the heart of development policies is the only way to ensure a human-centered, inclusive, and equitable development. So, arts are really important, culture is really important, and making sure that art and culture is equitable is extremely important, because without those things happening equitably, we're not going to get equitable outcomes for our community, and our community is going to be imbalanced on whole. It's not going to be a community. Where are we going with this? I don't know. Let me turn my page. So, too far. We saw these words a few seconds ago, right? You said them with me. Development of policy, support of the artists, nurturing of accessible, thriving venues for expression, et cetera, et cetera. These things fall under the purview across our nation of what we call local arts agencies. And there's a long definition. Again, it's an Americans for the Arts definition. Local arts agencies do a lot of different things, and they're shaped in a lot of different ways. Some are fully governmental, embedded in departments. Maybe they have their own department. Maybe they're in an elected official's office with a liaison. Maybe they're a nonprofit, maybe they're multiple nonprofits. Some are even for-profits, interestingly enough. But they share something in common, and that's each in its own way works to sustain the health and vitality of the arts and artists locally, and they also strive to make the arts accessible to all members of a community. So, who is out here doing the work in Fort Worth to help artists locally and make the arts accessible in our community? Arts Fort Worth, yes. Thank you. That was a rhetorical question you were right to not answer. But you could have. I wouldn't have mind. Arts Fort Worth, that's what we're here for. That's what we've been doing for 60 years in some shape or form, and that's what we'll be doing for umpteen years into the future in different ways. What I'm going to talk about for about 15 minutes here is some ways we've been doing that in partnership with the city of Fort Worth for about 20 years now. This has been the model. We'll unpack some of the details of that. Of course, we'll leave time for question and answer so you can dig deeper if anything specifically resonates with you or you want to learn more And of course, you can always reach out to me separately. We can have a conversation. But the mission of Arts Fort Worth is to create an environment that promotes, nurtures, and supports the arts in our community. And our vision, as it's emerging, this hasn't been formally adopted yet, but it's to see that everyone in Fort Worth can share their stories through the arts, see their experiences reflected in the art around them. We have a couple programs, 3 programs specifically, that we partner with the City of Fort Worth, that the City of Fort Worth is funding, and through contract we are carrying forward. One of those that's basically been with us since the origins of Arts Fort Worth, formerly the Arts Council of Fort Worth, is the grants program. We give out grants to support arts. Some of those goals of that program are to foster a culture of creativity and inclusivity, to celebrate the diversity of our community, to create access. One thing we see consistently year over year is that grant-supported nonprofits in our community, of which ranges from 30 to 40 in a given year, are yielding about 50% of their programming free to the public. So 50% of everything they do is accessible to y'all and everyone else in this community without having to pay a dime. And these resources strengthen the service capacity and business practices of arts providers. They can sustain into the future and adapt to the future. And you know, they promote tourism and economic growth. Those are good things too. We'll keep talking about them as the day goes on. Some details about last year's grants programs. We have a few of them. One of those grants programs is a general operating fund, which basically means the resources can be used pretty widely by organizations to keep the lights on, to you know, pay for the person who's greeting you at the doors, time. And with that, we were able to provide a little over $800,000 to 34 arts nonprofits last year, and these are all public dollars in this instance. The process for doing so is through a series. There's an application process, then there's a series of community panels of volunteers, community members, professionals who are adjudicating on a scale using criteria that involves the artistic merit of, I'm sorry, that's historically what we did, using the mission of an organization and what that mission means to the community impact of that organization, and the capacity for that organization to carry forward what they're proposing to do. In addition to the general operating, there's about just under 120,000 of community outreach support. So these are programs going into communities. They're usually educationally aligned, sometimes with Texas Essentials knowledge and skills standards. And 13 organizations in this last cycle a year ago received those awards. We were able to give away $11,000 for diversity, equity, and inclusion capacity building. That's everything from board training to translation to culturally sensitive marketing. There were 7 nonprofits in this last cycle that received that. And I think there were about 14 new board members brought on to these organizations as a result of that, actually. It was a really amazing outcome. And then we partner with Visit Fort Worth to administer tourism public improvement dollars. And those are a very interesting assessment on hotels of over 100 rooms. And those resources, in this case, this past year, $384,000 went to 11 arts and culture nonprofits. And then through some great advocacy and work in our community, we were able to actually expand the criteria for that this year. We just did the panels last Monday, is that right? Yeah. And we were able to double the number with nonprofits who are smaller than these 11 that received it previously. Thank you, yeah. And then we continue to pilot new programs. For the past 2 years, we've been putting independent artists in community centers around the community, and we're evaluating the efficacy of that, but essentially we want to get dollars into the hands of artists to support our community, one way or the other. So how you can help us be successful in these public grant dollar programs. You can volunteer to be a grant panelist. You won't make it into this cycle because we're literally doing our 4 panels for those other programs next week. So, and I think we actually have some panelists with us here today, and thank you for your time. But if you go to artsfortworth.org/grant, you'll be able to find an application to get your name in the hat for next year when we go through this process again. You can refer us to arts nonprofits and independent creatives that you meet, so we have them on our radar so we can invite them to apply, because it's not always easy for them to find our resources. It's not always easy for us to find them, but through y'all's connections, we can make that happen. And you can talk to your elected officials about the benefits of increasing public grant funding and providing funding with fewer restrictions, so our arts nonprofits can be trusted to do what they do best and serve our community as well. Yeah, woo. So another thing we do is we operate a community arts center for the time being. And the mission of that is to provide a quality event, visual, and performing arts venue for all of the community. I think many of you have probably been there before, 1300 Gendy Street. Over 20 years ago, it was the home of the Modern Art Museum, which itself is actually the oldest continuing museum in the state of Texas. Now resides down the street in a beautiful building. But when that change happened, the city of Fort Worth turned the space into the Fort Worth Community Arts Center. And that space has 7 indoor galleries right now. It has an outdoor space where artists can experience putting out temporary works that equip them to be better suited for public art contracts on a larger scale. We have 9 organizations as subtenants in the building, 5 studio artists working in the space, and managing 2 theaters there. So there's the Sanders Theater, it's a black box, a little bit smaller than this one, and W. Scott Theater, which is a 500-seat proscenium stage with an orchestra pit, fly space, the works. And those spaces accommodate about 50 groups in a year. They're pretty much booked up every weekend and often throughout the week. So the Art Center is obviously a treasure in this community, and we're honored to program it to serve about 3,000 artists a year there, and I mentioned the 50 groups and other subtenants. Some ways you can help that Art Center be successful on a regular basis is, I should back up here without looking at my notes. So the Art Center is also the home of a lot of programs that Arts Fort Worth puts on. And no, I'm sorry, Ryan, I'm really throwing you here. You can go to that slide. Yeah, thank you. We put on a number of programs to support our artists and to support our community. It's everything from sessions where we listen to the needs and plans of our community, Art Aid in partnership with our friends in the Near South Side, and Artes de la Rosa, where we help artists equip themselves for best business practices and network there. Crit Night, critiquing works of art, Artist Talks. We have a Fringe Festival just a few weeks ago. Original work series, unpublished plays get performed by small troops in the community. And the list goes on, and I probably am burning my time up here, so we'll keep moving. But ways you can help the Art Center. Generally speaking, you can visit the Art Center, buy a ticket to something, sign up for a class, purchase some art. All that stuff supports the artists that we're there presenting and helping to do their thing. You can volunteer to help us gather zip codes as people are coming through the door. That helps us understand who in our community is setting foot in that space. And you can talk to your elected officials about those important, accessible places for local art across Fort Worth. And a great place to do that, a great time to do that will be October 11. I don't know if you have your calendars in front of you. We'll send out more information. We'll have a public meeting at the Scott Theater pertaining to some proposals that are being considered by the city for what may be done with the space at 1300 Gendy. So a great opportunity to learn more about what the Art Center could be in the future and to share your voice about what you think it could be and what our community needs. But we'll keep moving to public art, another important program that we've been managing for over 20 years on behalf of the city of Fort Worth. And this helps us engage local communities, often a cross-section of neighborhood leaders, business leaders, just residents and members of the community, and helping them to define their vision for where they live and work, and helping them work together to enable an artist, empower an artist to take that vision and enshrine it in a work of public art that'll last 50, 100 years in our community and be something we can all be proud of. Right now, this is actually kind of old. The tough thing about working with a team that's really good at their jobs is they're always churning out more stuff, and I have to update these slides. But at the time that I put these together 4 or 5 months ago, there was 151 works in the collection, valued at over $24 million, and that's just valued in the sense that money was put in to create them and make it happen. That doesn't take in the appreciation that happens when a work of art exists for a long time. There are over 40 projects, actually 41, I think, in progress right now at different stages, everything from community engagement and pre-planning to artist selection to final design review. And then the works in the collection continue to win regional, national, and even international recognition and awards, which is pretty cool for Fort Worth. Ways you can help the Fort Worth Public Art Program is attend a monthly art commission meeting. Those typically happen on the third Monday of each month at the Fort Worth Community Arts Center, or a project-specific public meeting. So if there's a project in your neighborhood, and they'll show you some resources for how you can find that. Of course, just following us on social media is always the easiest way. You can get connected to that project and share your insights and thoughts about what it should be or could be or might be. FWPublicArt.org is a great place to find some of that information as well. And you can share with your elected officials the ways in which public art engages community and encourages increased support for existing works in your public collection. Yes, question.
Would you suggest sharing with our elected officials via email or going in person? Or how would you recommend reaching out to those people that don't always listen?
Yeah.
To our
This isn't being recorded. No, there's yes. The answer is yes. If you haven't had a relationship with your elected official, if you're a council member or others, it's one way to start that process is to reach out through the city's website. Will show you the district email address. It's usually like district6@fortworthtexas.gov. If you start to build those relationships, which is something probably a lot of us in here have done, as you go to Steer Fort Worth events and other things, and you meet our officials and develop a rapport with them, great opportunity in passing just to mention how these things are valuable to you, because they're listening all the time, even if it doesn't feel like it. They are realizing that people are bugging them about something over and over and over. And then you can always set up a meeting. You can reach out via email or call, and you can set up a time to sit down with them and have a more formal conversation. If you ever need resources for that, I can provide those. Someone else on my team can provide those. We're happy to join you on conversations like that. It's really any number of ways that type of advocacy can happen. It's just a matter of getting it started and trying to reach out one way or the other. So, great question. Cool. I think public art. Oh, so this is a map, again, not up to date, but this is just a quick snapshot of where projects are or are going to be. And one detail about the public art program, here we go, is that we work through bond projects, basically. So those are, bonds that are issued, well, we all know here in Steer Fort Worth, issued through bond elections. A percentage of that goes to the creation of public art. It's 2% for most bonds, except for roads, which are now down to 1%. And those resources are transmuted into artworks that we try really hard to put all around the city of Fort Worth, especially in concentrations of residents. And one thing that is challenging is because bonds don't always get distributed equitably around the community, it kind of falls on us to pick and choose how we can make sure that we're distributing these projects with the greatest amount of equity possible. I just got the questions card, so there's a whole bunch of other stuff we can click through on these slides, but the important thing is really for me to hear from y'all. So real fast, we'll just go one more slide in. This is the team that's making it all possible right now. One of the confusing and wonderful things about Arts Fort Worth is we are two separate nonprofits that are working as one. But up there you can kind of see who is sort of doing what. And the thing I was going to say, it was going to be really cool if I didn't run out of time, is basically this is a team of people who are all almost independently working on a different thing. But when we come together, we are able to do pretty incredible things. One of those, Wesley just mentioned, the Heart of Gold Awards Luncheon. We were able to bring together our community and honor some incredible leaders. And that takes all of us on the team working together, usually overtime on top of our regular things we're doing. And for me, that's a great metaphor for what this community can do and needs to do, is come together, work together. We all do separate things, we all do different things, but we all care about the arts and we all care about Fort Worth. And if we can set aside little problems and differences, if we can find commonalities and really commit to doing something, we can make big things happen. So don't worry about showing the fancy video and all that. We can, you can find it on artsfortworth.org, where you can find a lot of things. But I do want to lift up the lights and lift up your questions, so please ask away. Or we can watch the video. I mean, yeah. Elena. Of course, yeah. So I mentioned there is an annual contract with Arts Fort Worth, which is the primary vehicle for public funding. A lot of those funds come from the general fund, which is the most cluttered fund in the city of Fort Worth. It's where a lot of the programs and operations are housed. So it's also a very competitive fund, and it's one that if there isn't a strong voice vying for one thing or the other, things often get reduced or sustained at low levels because there is so much competition within that fund. The fund is made up of all sorts of different sources: property tax, sales tax, I think even some fees and things like that are baked into it. But essentially, the bulk of what you saw with the grants, with the public art administration, so the piece that's actually paying for the team to do the hard work of engaging our community, all that is through the general fund. It comes out to be a little less than $1 million for the grants, $500,000 for public art administration, It's been $200,000 for management of the Arts Center for 20 years straight. So, you know, if you know how to calculate inflation, you can imagine what that would actually be these days. I think 350,000 or something like that. But that's all general fund. There are a few little instances that are not general fund. I mentioned the Tourism Public Improvement District. That is an assessment on hotels that Visit Fort Worth helps us partner with. Some cities use the hotel occupancy tax. Frankly, a lot of cities in Texas use that. That is a, you know, when you go to a hotel and you see your receipt at the end of the day, there's a bunch of little percentage numbers at the bottom. Part of that is the hotel occupancy tax that's going to arts organizations. Prior to this past legislative session, there wasn't a lot of transparency about where that money went, but up to 15% of a hotel occupancy tax levied in a community can be used for arts activities and maintenance of arts facilities. Recently, thanks to great advocates, Megan's here, Aisha's here, we went down to Austin as part of a push to create some more transparency around that, and we were successful. So in the future, we'll get to know better where some of that hotel occupancy tax is going in communities like ours. However, I can tell you pretty confidently that it's not going to arts activities. Those are some funding sources, and each one kind of implies its ability to be used, and then on top of that, there's policy decisions that further restrict it. So there's an endless rabbit hole to go down, but at a high level, that's a great question, Lena. Thank you. Debbie.
Can you tell us a little more about October 11th and what you expect and what we should expect as the public? And out of curiosity, do you know why we are not allowed to be informed about how many RFPs we'll receive after we followed the process?
I can't answer that question. Yeah, no, I mean, the truth is there isn't a lot of answers at this point. But there is a selection committee that's been appointed through the task force process to reassess the use of 1300 Gendy, the Fort Worth Community Arts Center. The request for proposals that went out to the market closed about a week ago. I think it was the 15th. And between that time and the 11th, that selection committee is reviewing proposals. We don't know how many proposals. I don't know how many proposals. I don't think it's inappropriate to ask that question of city officials, appointed and elected. But there will be at most 4 proposals selected and at most 4 proposals presented at October 11. I haven't talked with the team yet, but honestly, we're probably going to have to think about buying food or something because it's going to be a long night. Each proposal gets an hour, so if we have all 4 proposals presented, it's 4 hours starting at 6 o'clock in the evening. So we'll at least do popcorn. But essentially, it'll be an opportunity for them to pitch to the community. It'll be an opportunity for the community to hear. And I believe, I can't say this with certainty yet because I haven't seen the final agenda, but I believe there'll be public comment opportunities within that evening. And I know for sure there'll be public comment after that. It'll probably be a very short time. Originally, they were talking about 2 days. Many of us have asked for more time because 2 days is no time. But if it is that short, if it is that much of a window, we're going to make sure everyone knows that that's the window, and I really hope y'all can help us fill that window with your voices and with your hopes for what that space could be. Thank you.
Running out of time, I got one last question for you. What gives you hope for the future of arts in Fort Worth?
This, y'all. I mean, seriously, it's coming together. It's working together. You know, I see it so many times. I see it with Steer Fort Worth. I see it with Support Fort Worth Art. Awesome shirt. Awesome shirt. And I see it, you know, in our individual groups. I mean, there's so many partnerships that happen. Amphibian is, again, I'm going to keep coming back to them because they're here and we're in their space, sharing their space. But they partner with everyone in this community, Steer Fort Worth. And it's those partnerships, it's those collaborations, it's those working together for whatever the goal is. That gives me a lot of hope. And it keeps happening better and more. And if I can do anything to help that, let me know because I want to do that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.